The warning klaxons screamed across the Catherian research station as Captain Sarah Chen stepped off the transport shuttle. Her boots clicked against the metal deck plates while emergency lights painted everything in harsh red shadows. Around her, tall insectoid aliens skittered back and forth, their chittering voices creating a constant buzz of panic. "Welcome to Research Station Omega-7, said Commander Zektar, his mandibles clicking with what Sarah had learned was either nervousness or aggression. "Though I fear your arrival comes at an unfortunate time." Sarah adjusted her standard diplomatic uniform and smiled. The gesture seemed to make the Catherians even more agitated, their compound eyes reflecting the emergency lighting like fractured mirrors. She had studied their species for months before this assignment, but seeing them in person was still unsettling. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws and legs that bent backward like a praying mantis. "Nothing I can't handle," Sarah replied, keeping her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "The Universal Council sent me here to evaluate your species for potential membership. A few technical difficulties won't stop that process." Zektar's head tilted in a way that suggested disbelief. "Technical difficulties? Human, one of our apex specimens has escaped containment. We are dealing with a shadow maw." The name meant nothing to Sarah, but the way every Catherian in earshot suddenly went silent told her it was significant. She watched as security teams rushed past, carrying weapons that hummed with exotic energy signatures. "I see," she said carefully. "And this shadow maw is dangerous." Commander Zektar made a sound like grinding metal. "Dangerous? It is death itself given form. The shadow maw is the perfect predator. It can shift through solid matter like smoke, strike faster than thought, and its claws can slice through our strongest armor plating. We bred them on our homeworld to hunt the most dangerous prey in our ecosystem." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. And how exactly did it escape?" "A power fluctuation in the containment grid," admitted Dr. Velnari, another Catherian who approached with 3 research tablets clutched in her multiple arms. "The backup systems failed to engage in time. Now it stalks the station corridors, and we cannot predict where it will strike next." The emergency klaxons cut off suddenly, leaving an eerie silence that seemed worse than the noise. In the distance, Sarah could hear the heavy footsteps of security teams and the low hum of charging weapons. "How many casualties?" Sarah asked. "None yet," Zektar replied, his tone suggesting this was temporary. "The creature seems to be exploring, but it is only a matter of time before it begins hunting. When it does, nothing on this station will be safe." Sarah looked around at the assembled Catherians. Despite their fearsome appearance, she could see genuine terror in their body language. Their claws clicked nervously against their equipment, and many kept glancing toward the ceiling as if expecting something to drop down at any moment. "Perhaps I should return to my ship until this situation is resolved," Sarah suggested. "Impossible," Zektar said immediately. "The station is on complete lockdown. No ships may launch until the threat is neutralized. We cannot risk the creature escaping to other systems." "Then I suppose I'll have to wait." Sarah picked up her single travel bag and slung it over her shoulder. "Could someone show me to my quarters?" Dr. Velnari's compound eyes seemed to bulge slightly. "You wish to walk through the station corridors, with the shadow maw loose?" "Well, I can't very well stay in the shuttle bay forever," Sarah pointed out reasonably. "Besides, you said it hasn't attacked anyone yet. Maybe it's not as dangerous as you think." The collective gasp from every Catherian within hearing range was audible. Zektar's mandibles clacked together in what Sarah was now certain was agitation. "Not dangerous? Human. The shadow maw is the apex predator of our homeworld. It evolved to hunt creatures that could themselves destroy entire ecosystems. We have used them for centuries as the ultimate test of our warriors' courage." "Interesting," Sarah said again. And these tests involve fighting the creature? Fighting? Zektar made that grinding sound again. No, human. The test is simply to stand in the same room with one for 60 seconds without fleeing. Most fail within 10 seconds. Many require psychological treatment afterward. Sarah absorbed this information while watching the security teams coordinate their search patterns on wall-mounted displays. The station seemed to be quite large, with multiple levels connected by a maze of corridors, maintenance shafts, and research laboratories. How long do these things typically live? She asked. Dr. Velnari consulted one of her tablets. In captivity, approximately 40 standard years. This specimen is still young, perhaps only 5 years old. It has not yet reached full maturity. And when fully mature, they're larger, faster, more intelligent, and infinitely more deadly, Zektar confirmed. An adult Shadowmaw can hunt in complete silence, phase through solid matter at will, and coordinate pack tactics with others of its kind. Sarah nodded slowly. Pack hunters. That suggests intelligence and social behavior. Social. Dr. Velnari's voice rose to a surprised chirp. They are killing machines, human. They know only the hunt. Everything has social behavior, Sarah said mildly. Even apex predators need to communicate, establish hierarchies, share resources. It's basic biology. The lights flickered suddenly, and every Catherian in the shuttle bay immediately raised their weapons toward the ceiling. After several tense seconds, the lights stabilized, and the security teams slowly lowered their arms. The creature is interfering with our power systems, Zektar explained. Another sign of its intelligence. It knows that darkness gives it the advantage. A new alarm began sounding, different from the escape warning. This one was short, sharp bursts that seemed to indicate some kind of proximity alert. What does that mean? Sarah asked. Dr. Velnari was frantically checking her tablets while other researchers crowded around wall-mounted displays. Biological sensors in Section C7. The creature is moving toward the residential quarters. That's where you would have been staying, Zektar said grimly. Perhaps it can smell your scent from the shuttle. Sarah raised an eyebrow. It's tracking me, specifically? Shadowmaws are attracted to unique biological signatures, Dr. Velnari explained. As the only human on the station, you would represent something completely new to its sensory experience. The proximity alarm grew more insistent, and Sarah could see the security teams redirecting their search toward the residential section. On the displays, she watched teams of armored Catherians moving carefully through corridors, their weapons charged and ready. How good are your people in a fight? Sarah asked. Our security teams are the finest warriors of the Catherian Empire, Zektar said with pride. Each has undergone decades of combat training and faced the most dangerous predators in known space. But not a Shadowmaw? The silence that followed answered her question. The few who have faced one in actual combat did not survive to share their experience, Dr. Velnari admitted quietly. Sarah watched the tactical displays as the security teams approached the residential section. She could see their formation was tight and professional, weapons covering all angles as they advanced through the corridors. There, Dr. Velnari suddenly pointed to one of the screens. Biological motion detected in corridor C12. On the display, Sarah could see the security team freeze as their sensors detected something ahead. The team leader made hand signals, and the group spread out into a defensive formation. Then the lights in that section went out completely. We're losing visual contact, reported a technician from across the shuttle bay. The audio feed from the security team filled the bay with harsh breathing and whispered communications. Sarah could hear the fear in their voices, even through the translation software. Movement above, whispered one team member. I've got thermal readings in the air vents, reported another. Then came a sound like silk tearing, followed by a crash of equipment falling to the floor. The audio feed erupted into shouts and the high-pitched whine of energy weapons firing. "Status report!" Zektar barked into his communicator. "It's gone," came the shaky reply. "Just vanished. Johnson's weapon was sliced clean in half, but no sign of injury. The creature could have killed him easily, but chose not to." Dr. Velnari's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Curious behavior. Shadow Maws are not known for restraint." Sarah stepped closer to the displays, studying the tactical readouts. "Maybe it's not hunting them. Maybe it's just exploring like you said." "Exploring or not, it remains a lethal threat," Zektar insisted. "We must find a way to return it to containment before someone is hurt." The biological sensors suddenly lit up with new readings, and alarm tones filled the air again. This time, however, the readings were moving rapidly through the station's main corridors, heading directly toward the shuttle bay. "It's coming here," Dr. Velnari said unnecessarily. Around the bay, every Cytherian raised their weapons toward the main entrance. Sarah could feel the tension radiating from them like heat from a flame. Several researchers backed away from the doors, and she noticed that some were actually trembling. "Perhaps," Sarah said calmly, "I should meet this creature." The universal translation software must have malfunctioned, because the suggestion was followed by complete silence from every Cytherian in the bay. "Meet it?" Zektar's voice cracked slightly. "Human. It is a killing machine evolved specifically to hunt and destroy. You cannot simply meet a Shadow Maw." Sarah shrugged and walked toward the entrance doors. Only one way to find out. Behind her, she could hear the frantic chittering of Cytherian voices, but she ignored them. The biological sensor showed the creature was now just outside the shuttle bay, apparently waiting. The doors hissed open, and Sarah stepped into the corridor beyond. The corridor was dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows that seemed to move and shift on their own. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in the sudden quiet. But she wasn't afraid. Growing up on a frontier colony world had taught her that most dangerous creatures were simply misunderstood. "Incredible," she heard Dr. Velnari whisper from behind her. "The human shows no fear response whatsoever." Sarah smiled slightly and continued walking down the corridor. The biological sensors on the walls were flashing steadily, indicating the creature was very close. She could feel something watching her, but there was nothing threatening about the sensation. "Where are you?" she asked softly, her voice echoing slightly in the empty hallway. A soft sound like wind through leaves came from somewhere above her. Sarah looked up at the ceiling panels, which were designed to allow access to the station's ventilation systems. One panel near the center of the corridor was slightly askew. "Up there?" Sarah asked. The panel shifted almost imperceptibly. Sarah set her travel bag down and stood directly under the displaced panel. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." From the shuttle bay behind her, she could hear Zektar speaking urgently into his communicator, probably coordinating additional security teams. The sound of boots on metal indicated that reinforcements were already on their way. "They're scared of you," Sarah continued, keeping her voice gentle. "But I don't think you're as dangerous as they believe. Are you?" The panel moved again, this time sliding aside by several inches. Sarah caught a glimpse of something that looked like flowing shadow, but with substance and weight. "That's it," she encouraged. "I just want to see you." The security teams were getting closer now. Sarah could hear their weapons powering up and their whispered tactical communications. She knew they would be here in less than a minute, and their presence would likely frighten the creature back into hiding. "If you're going to show yourself, now would be a good time," Sarah said quietly. The ceiling panel suddenly dropped to the floor with a metallic clang, and something flowed down from the opening like liquid darkness. It landed silently in front of Sarah, and she got her first clear look at a Shadow Maw. The creature was beautiful. Standing about 4 feet tall at the shoulder, it had a sleek, cat-like body covered in what looked like living shadow. Its fur seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an almost hypnotic visual effect. Large, intelligent eyes regarded Sarah with obvious curiosity, and its head tilted in a gesture that reminded her of every curious predator she had ever encountered. Most striking were its claws, which extended from paws that seemed too delicate for something supposedly so dangerous. The claws were clearly sharp enough to cut through metal, but they were retracted just enough to avoid damaging the floor as the creature moved. "Hello there," Sarah said softly. The shadow maw took a careful step closer, its movements flowing like water. Sarah could see that it was young, probably still growing into its full size. There was something almost playful in the way it approached, like a large cat investigating something new and interesting. "You're just curious, aren't you?" Sarah asked. "All this panic over a young predator exploring new territory." The creature made a sound like a purr mixed with wind chimes. It was actually quite pleasant. Sarah slowly reached into her travel bag and pulled out her emergency rations. The concentrated protein bars were designed to be nutritious and appealing to a variety of alien biologies. She unwrapped one and held it out toward the shadow maw. "Hungry?" The creature's nose twitched as it caught the scent of the food. Its eyes went wide, and it made that wind chime purring sound again, louder this time. Behind Sarah, she could hear the security teams approaching the corridor entrance. Their footsteps stopped abruptly, and she knew they could see what was happening. "Human," Zektar's voice called out carefully. "Please step away from the creature very slowly." Sarah ignored him and continued holding out the protein bar. The shadow maw stretched its neck forward and delicately took the food from her hand, its movements precise and controlled. There was nothing savage or mindless about the gesture. "Good boy," Sarah said, using the same tone she had used with the hunting cats on her colony world. The creature's eyes practically glowed with pleasure as it consumed the treat. When it finished, it looked at Sarah expectantly and made the purring sound again. Sarah couldn't help herself. She giggled. The sound echoed down the corridor, followed by absolute silence from the assembled Catherians. Sarah reached out slowly and gently scratched behind one of the creature's ears. The shadow maw leaned into the contact, purring loudly enough that the sound reverberated off the walls. "Impossible," she heard Dr. Velnari breathe. Sarah looked back toward the security teams and smiled. "I think there might be some miscommunication about what exactly this creature is." The shadow maw pressed closer to Sarah's hand, clearly enjoying the attention. Its purring had grown so loud that she could feel the vibrations through the deck plating beneath her feet. The creature's entire demeanor was that of a large, friendly cat seeking affection from a new favorite person. Behind her, the security teams remained frozen at the corridor entrance. Sarah could hear their weapons humming with stored energy. But no one seemed willing to risk a shot with her standing so close to their supposed apex predator. "Dr. Chen," Commander Zektar called carefully, "what you are doing is unprecedented. No Catherian has ever made physical contact with a shadow maw and survived." Sarah continued scratching behind the creature's ears, noting how it had specific spots that made it purr even louder. "Maybe that's because no one ever tried being friendly instead of afraid." The shadow maw suddenly dropped into a play bow, its front end low while its rear end stayed up. Its tail, which Sarah was now seeing clearly for the first time, swished back and forth in an unmistakably playful manner. "Oh, you want to play?" Sarah laughed. She reached back into her travel bag and pulled out a small ball she used for exercise during long space flights. The shadow maw's eyes locked onto the object immediately, and its pupils dilated with obvious interest. Sarah tossed the ball gently down the corridor. The shadow maw bounded after it with fluid grace, its movement so smooth it seemed to flow across the floor rather than run. It caught the ball mid-air, then trotted back to Sarah with what could only be described as a proud expression. "Good catch," Sarah praised, taking the ball and throwing it again. From the security teams came sounds that the translation software couldn't quite process, but Sarah suspected they were expressions of complete disbelief. Dr. Velnari slowly approached from the shuttle bay, her multiple eyes fixed on the playing Shadow Maw. "This behavior is not documented in any of our research. The creature appears to be enjoying itself." "Of course it is," Sarah said, catching the ball again as the Shadow Maw returned it. "It's a young, intelligent predator that's been kept in isolation. It probably hasn't had any stimulation or social interaction in months." Social interaction? Zektar had also moved closer, though he kept several other Catherians between himself and the creature. Shadow Maws are solitary hunters. Sarah paused in her game and looked at him. "According to whom?" "Our xenobiologists have studied them for centuries," Dr. Velnari replied. "They are apex predators, evolved to hunt alone and without mercy." "But you said yourself they can coordinate pack tactics when mature," Sarah pointed out. "That requires communication, social hierarchies, and cooperative behavior. None of that develops in isolation." The Shadow Maw had grown bored waiting for the next throw and decided to investigate Sarah's travel bag instead. It sniffed carefully around the edges, then looked up at her with an expression that clearly asked permission. "Go ahead," Sarah said. The creature delicately opened the bag with one claw and began examining the contents with obvious curiosity. It pulled out Sarah's portable tablet, turned it over several times, then looked at her questioningly. "That's not food," Sarah explained. The Shadow Maw made a small huffing sound that seemed like laughter and continued exploring. It found her spare uniform, which it sniffed thoroughly before making approving purring sounds. Apparently, it liked her scent. "Remarkable," Dr. Velnari said, making notes on one of her tablets. "The creature is demonstrating problem-solving behavior, curiosity, and what appears to be humor. It's also demonstrating trust," Sarah added. "Look at its body language, relaxed posture, slow movements, frequent eye contact. This is an animal that feels safe and comfortable." The Shadow Maw had found something else interesting in her bag, a small medical kit that contained various tools and supplies. It carefully extracted a roll of bandage tape and began playing with it, batting it back and forth between its paws. "Should we be allowing this?" Zektar asked nervously. "The creature is unsupervised and could become aggressive at any moment." "Could you become aggressive at any moment?" Sarah asked him. What? That is different. I am a sapient being with moral reasoning." "So is he," Sarah said, nodding toward the Shadow Maw. "You're just assuming he isn't because you've only seen him in artificial captive conditions." The Shadow Maw had managed to unroll several feet of bandage tape and was now thoroughly tangled in it. It looked up at Sarah with what she interpreted as embarrassment and made a small mewing sound. "Oh, you've made a mess," Sarah said gently, kneeling down to help untangle the tape. The moment she knelt to the creature's level, its entire demeanor changed. It moved closer and rested its head against her shoulder, still purring but now with a deeper, more contented tone. Sarah could feel the warmth of its body through her uniform. "Incredible," Dr. Velnari breathed. "It's seeking comfort contact. That's a behavior we've only observed in highly social species." Sarah finished removing the tape and gathered it back into a neat roll. The Shadow Maw watched with interest, then gently took one end of the tape in its mouth and helped her wind it up. "Tool use," observed one of the security team members, "and cooperative problem-solving." "How long has this individual been in captivity?" Sarah asked. Dr. Velnari consulted her tablet. "It was captured as a juvenile approximately 2 years ago. It has been housed in isolation since arrival at the station." 2 years in solitary confinement," Sarah said quietly. "No wonder the poor thing is desperate for interaction." She stood up, and the Shadow Maw immediately moved to walk beside her, matching her pace perfectly. When she stopped, it stopped. When she turned, it turned with her. The bonding behavior was obvious to anyone watching. "This is problematic," Zektar said. "The creature appears to have imprinted on you. That will make it extremely difficult to return it to containment." "Why would you want to return it to containment?" Sarah asked. "You've seen for yourself that it's intelligent, social, and non-aggressive when treated properly." "Because it is dangerous!" Zektar's voice rose slightly. "Just because it is behaving peacefully now does not change its nature as an apex predator." Sarah reached down to pet the Shadow Maw, which immediately leaned into her touch. "So are humans. Would you keep me in isolation because I'm technically capable of violence?" The question hung in the air while the assembled Cytherians considered it. Sarah could see them looking at her differently now, perhaps realizing that she too was a predator species, just one that had learned to control its instincts. "The comparison is not equivalent," Dr. Velnari said carefully. "Humans are sapient beings with complex moral and social structures. This is an animal." "Is it?" Sarah asked. "Have you ever tried to communicate with one? Have you attempted to teach it language or abstract concepts? Have you studied its social needs or provided appropriate environmental enrichment?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "You've treated it like a dangerous object instead of a living being," Sarah continued. "Then you wonder why it doesn't behave like a social creature." The Shadow Maw had been listening to the conversation with obvious attention. Now it looked up at Sarah and made a series of soft sounds that had distinct tonal variations. It was clearly trying to communicate something. Sarah knelt down again and listened carefully. The sounds were complex, with multiple overtones and rhythmic patterns. They sounded almost like, "You're trying to talk, aren't you?" she said softly. The Shadow Maw's eyes brightened, and it repeated the sequence of sounds, this time with slight variations in pitch and timing. Dr. Velnari was frantically taking notes. "The vocalizations are showing linguistic structure, grammar patterns, emotional modulation, and what appears to be question intonation." "How many Shadow Maws have you studied?" Sarah asked, still maintaining eye contact with the creature. "This is our only live specimen," Zektar admitted. "Others have been observed in the wild, but always from a safe distance. So your entire understanding of the species is based on this one individual who has been kept in solitary confinement for 2 years." When she put it that way, the flaws in their research methodology became obvious. The Cytherians began exchanging glances and chittering among themselves in their own language. The Shadow Maw made another series of sounds, this time looking back and forth between Sarah and the Cytherians. It seemed to be asking a question about them. "Those are my hosts," Sarah explained. "They're not dangerous, just scared." The creature tilted its head thoughtfully, then walked over to where Dr. Velnari was standing. The scientist froze as the Shadow Maw approached, but the creature simply sat down at a respectful distance and made soft, non-threatening sounds. "I think it's trying to apologize," Sarah said, "for frightening everyone earlier." Dr. Velnari looked down at the creature, then slowly extended one of her hands. The Shadow Maw sniffed carefully, then gently bumped its head against her palm. "Extraordinary," she whispered. "The contact is completely non-aggressive." Other Cytherians began moving closer, curiosity overcoming their fear. The Shadow Maw remained calm and patient, allowing each of them to approach at their own pace. Commander Zektar was the last to approach. He stood several feet away, studying the creature intently. "If you are correct about its intelligence and social nature," he said slowly, "then we have made a grave error in our treatment of this being." The Shadow Maw looked at him and made what sounded like an agreeable chirp. Sarah smiled. "I think it just accepted your apology." Zekatar's mandibles clicked in what Sarah had learned was surprise. But how could you possibly know that? Experience, Sarah said simply. I've worked with a lot of predators over the years. She realized as soon as she said it that she had revealed more than she intended. The Catherians were all looking at her now with renewed interest and not a little concern. What kind of experience? Dr. Velnari asked carefully. Sarah looked around at the assembled aliens, then down at the Shadow Maw, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes. She had a feeling her cover as a simple diplomatic observer was about to be blown. Maybe we should discuss that somewhere more comfortable, she said, along with a few other things about my background that might be relevant to this situation. 3 hours later, Sarah sat in the station's main conference room with the Shadow Maw curled up beside her chair like an oversized house cat. The creature had insisted on staying close to her, and attempts to separate them had resulted in distressed whining that broke everyone's hearts. Commander Zektar, Dr. Velnari, and the senior staff occupied the other seats around the circular table, their weapons conspicuously absent. The Shadow Maw had spent the past hour making friendly contact with each of them, and it was becoming impossible to maintain the fiction that it was a mindless killing machine. So, Zektar said, his tone carefully neutral, you mentioned that you have experience with predators. Sarah nodded and activated her personal tablet, displaying her official credentials. I should have been more forthcoming initially. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm not just a diplomatic observer. I'm a xenobiologist specializing in apex predator behavior, with a secondary expertise in interspecies communication protocols. Dr. Velnari's compound eyes widened. Your credentials show fieldwork on 17 different worlds. Some of these predator species are legendary for their deadliness. The Universal Council sent me because your species mentioned Shadow Maws in your membership application, Sarah continued. They were concerned about your methods of containing what you described as uncontrollably violent apex predators. The Catherians exchanged uncomfortable glances. Zektar's mandibles clicked slowly. Are you saying our membership application is being evaluated based on our treatment of these creatures? Partially, yes. Sarah scratched behind the Shadow Maw's ears, earning a contented purr. The Council has learned that how a species treats its apex predators often reflects how they'll treat other species they consider dangerous or inferior. The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air. Sarah could see the Catherians processing the idea that their fear-based approach to the Shadow Maws might have cost them Council membership. But our research indicated that Shadow Maws were impossibly dangerous, Dr. Velnari protested. Every historical account describes them as unstoppable killing machines. Sarah pulled up another file on her tablet. I've reviewed your historical accounts. Most of them describe encounters between armed Catherian hunting parties and wild Shadow Maws protecting territory or young. In every case, the Catherians were the aggressors. She showed them a detailed analysis of the encounters. In 70% of cases, the Shadow Maw retreated rather than fought. In 20%, it gave warning displays before attacking. Only 10% involved immediate aggression, and those were all situations where the Catherian party had directly threatened cubs or dens. But the casualties, Zektar said weakly, were entirely avoidable, Sarah finished. Your hunting parties were treating them like monsters instead of intelligent beings with complex social structures and territorial behaviors. The Shadow Maw made a soft sound and looked up at Sarah. She could see something like sadness in its eyes, and she realized it might be understanding more of the conversation than anyone had assumed. How much of this do you think he understands? Dr. Velnari asked, following Sarah's gaze. More than we initially realized. Sarah looked directly at the creature. You understand that we're talking about your people, don't you? The Shadow Maw sat up and made a series of complex vocalizations. The sounds had a distinctly mournful quality, and several of the Catherians shifted uncomfortably. He's grieving, Sarah said quietly. For his family, his pack, his entire social structure. You've isolated him from everything that makes life meaningful for his species. Dr. Velnari was taking rapid notes. But how can we be certain he's actually sapient and not just displaying complex instinctual behaviors? Sarah smiled and pulled out her tablet. She opened a simple mathematics program that displayed basic addition problems. Let's find out. She showed the tablet to the Shadow Maw and pointed to an equation. 2 plus 3e. The creature studied the screen intently, then used one claw to carefully touch the number 5 on the virtual keypad. Lucky guess, Zektar muttered. Sarah tried a more complex problem. 7 plus 8s. Again, the Shadow Maw provided the correct answer after only a few seconds of consideration. Pattern recognition, Dr. Velnari suggested, but her tone was uncertain. Sarah switched to a language learning program. She showed the creature simple pictographs representing basic concepts: food, water, danger, safety. After each image, she spoke the English word clearly. Within 20 minutes, the Shadow Maw was correctly identifying each image when Sarah spoke the corresponding word. More impressively, it had begun making distinct vocalizations for each concept, creating its own linguistic associations. This is impossible, Zektar said flatly. You're suggesting this creature learned basic language concepts in less than half an hour. I'm not suggesting it, Sarah replied. I'm demonstrating it. She opened a new program and showed the Shadow Maw a series of spatial reasoning puzzles. The creature solved each one faster than the previous, clearly understanding the underlying logical principles. Its cognitive development has been severely stunted by isolation, Sarah explained. In a proper social environment, it would have learned these concepts years ago from its parents and packmates. The Shadow Maw suddenly made an urgent sound and bounded over to the conference room's large viewing window. It pressed its face to the glass and began making excited chirping noises. Sarah joined it at the window and looked out at the star field beyond. There, barely visible against the cosmic backdrop, was another ship approaching the station. Are you expecting visitors? Sarah asked. Dr. Velnari checked her instruments. Unknown vessel requesting permission to dock. The configuration matches no known Catherian designs. The Shadow Maw's excitement was growing more intense. It was practically vibrating with energy, making complex vocalizations that sounded almost like singing. Can you get me a detailed scan of that ship? Sarah requested. The scanner results appeared on the main display, a sleek vessel with organic curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Its biosignatures indicated a crew of 6 beings with metabolisms similar to the Shadow Maw. It's them, Sarah said with growing excitement. It's his people. The Shadow Maw confirmed her assessment by throwing back its head and letting out a call that was hauntingly beautiful and clearly meant to carry across great distances. From the approaching ship came an answering call that made every being in the conference room feel a chill of recognition. They've come looking for him, Dr. Velnari realized. Commander Zektar was already activating the station's communication systems. Unknown vessel, this is Catherian Research Station Omega-7. State your intentions. The reply came in a voice that was unmistakably Shadow Maw in origin, but speaking perfect Catherian. This is Hunting Leader Velthara of the Deep Forest Pack. You have taken one of our young. We have come to retrieve him. The temperature in the conference room seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah looked around at the assembled Catherians and saw genuine fear returning to their faces. How many of them do you think are on that ship? Zektar asked quietly. Adult Shadow Maws, Dr. Velnari said, checking her scanner readings. 6 individuals, each approximately twice the size of our specimen. Sarah stood up and moved to the communication console. Hunting Leader Velthara, this is Dr. Sarah Chen of the Universal Council. Your young one is safe and well. We would welcome the opportunity to discuss his return. and establish proper diplomatic relations between our species. A long pause followed before the reply came. Human Sarah Chen, we have heard of you from others of your kind who have worked with the Council. You are known as a friend to apex predators. I try to be, Sarah said simply. We will dock and come aboard, but know this. If our young one has been harmed, there will be consequences. The communication ended, leaving the conference room in tense silence. The young Shadow Maw seemed oblivious to the threat, instead dancing around the room in pure joy at the prospect of seeing his family again. Dr. Chen, Zektar said carefully, what exactly are the consequences likely to be? Sarah looked at the scanner readings showing the approaching ship, then at the young Shadow Maw who was now trying to groom itself to look presentable for the reunion. That depends entirely on how we handle the next hour, she said. Shadow Maws are pack hunters, remember? And from what I've observed, they're highly intelligent, technologically capable, and absolutely devoted to their family groups. You're saying they could be a threat to the entire station? I'm saying they could be a valuable ally to your entire species, Sarah corrected. If we approach this correctly. Dr. Velnari was frantically reviewing her data files. But our research indicates that Shadow Maws are pre-technological. They shouldn't be capable of spaceflight. Your research was based on observing them in their natural habitat, Sarah pointed out. But think about it. A species with their intelligence, stealth capabilities, and pack coordination would be incredibly valuable as partners rather than prisoners. The docking clamps engaged with a solid thunk that echoed through the station's superstructure. On the security monitors, they could see 6 adult Shadow Maws moving through the airlock with fluid grace that made their young counterpart look clumsy by comparison. Each adult was indeed roughly twice the size of the young one, with additional features that spoke of full maturity. Longer claws, more elaborate patterns in their shadow-like fur, and an aura of confident power that was unmistakable even through the security feeds. They move like they own the universe, Zektar observed nervously. They move like apex predators who have learned to navigate technological civilizations, Sarah corrected. This is what your young friend here could become with proper socialization and education. The conference room doors chimed softly, and Dr. Velnari activated the entrance. 6 adult Shadow Maws flowed into the room like living darkness, their eyes immediately locking on to their young packmate. The reunion was immediate and joyful. The young Shadow Maw launched itself toward the adults, who caught him in a tangle of affectionate nuzzling and soft vocalizations. Sarah could see tears in Dr. Velnari's compound eyes as she witnessed the obvious love and relief of the family group. One of the adults, larger than the others and wearing what looked like technological accessories integrated into its fur, approached Sarah directly. I am Velthara, it said in perfect English. You are the one who befriended our young hunter? I am, Sarah replied. He's a remarkable individual. You should be very proud. Velthara's eyes studied Sarah intently, then moved to examine the Catherians around the room. They kept him in isolation. That is considered torture among our kind. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Sarah could feel the tension radiating from the Catherians, but she also sensed something else from Velthara. A willingness to listen rather than simply react with violence. They didn't understand, Sarah said carefully. They thought he was a mindless predator. They were afraid. Fear born of ignorance, Velthara agreed. But ignorance maintained through choice becomes cruelty. Commander Zektar stepped forward, his posture showing the formal submission gestures of Catherian diplomacy. Hunting leader Velthara, we acknowledge our error. We acted from fear and misunderstanding. We seek to make amends. Velthara considered this for a long moment, then looked at the young Shadow Maw, who was now contentedly surrounded by his pack family. Our young one shows no signs of abuse or maltreatment, Velthera said finally, and he has clearly formed a bond with the human Sarah. This suggests that some kindness was shown, even if understanding was lacking. Dr. Chen taught us that your people are intelligent and social, Dr. Velnari said, finding her voice. We would like to learn more if you're willing to share. Velthara's expression shifted to what Sarah recognized as surprise. You wish to learn about us? Not study us like specimens, but learn from us as equals? Yes, Zektar said immediately. If your pack would be willing to teach us. The young Shadow Maw made an excited sound and bounded over to Sarah. It began making complex vocalizations while looking back and forth between her and Velthara. He's telling them how I played with him and taught him new words, Sarah translated, smiling. He wants them to know that not all aliens are afraid of Shadow Maws. Velthara's posture relaxed slightly. Our young hunter speaks highly of you, Sarah Chen. He says you treated him like pack family rather than a prisoner. He deserved nothing less, Sarah replied. Velthara moved to the conference table and gracefully arranged herself in one of the chairs, a clear indication that negotiations were about to begin. The other adult Shadow Maws followed suit, while the young one claimed a spot directly between Sarah and Velthara. Very well, Velthara said. Let us discuss how our species might move forward from this unfortunate beginning. But first, I believe introductions are in order. Our young hunter tells me that none of you ever asked his name. The Cytherians looked embarrassed, and Sarah felt a pang of guilt for not thinking of it herself. In our language, he is called Dusk Runner of the Endless Hunt, Velthara continued. But he has expressed interest in choosing a shorter name for use among aliens who cannot properly pronounce our traditional forms. The young Shadow Maw looked directly at Sarah and made a questioning sound. Would you like me to suggest something? Sarah asked. He nodded eagerly. Sarah thought for a moment, considering everything she had learned about the young creature's personality and behavior. How about Scout? She suggested. It reflects your curiosity and intelligence. The newly named Scout chirped with obvious delight and immediately began introducing himself to each Cytherian using his chosen name. Dr. Velnari was frantically taking notes. This is unprecedented. We're witnessing the first recorded peaceful contact between Cytherians and Shadow Maws. The first of many, I hope, Velthara said. Our species have much to offer each other. We have technologies you have never seen, and you have knowledge of the greater galactic community that interests us greatly. Zektar leaned forward eagerly. You would be willing to share your technologies? In exchange for friendship, respect, and the opportunity for our young to learn alongside yours, Velthara confirmed. Scout has shown us that both species are capable of moving beyond fear to understanding. Sarah looked around the table at the assembled beings, Cytherians who had started the day fearing for their lives, Shadow Maws who had come expecting to rescue a tortured family member, and one enthusiastic young predator who had become the bridge between species. I think this is the beginning of a very interesting partnership, she said. Scout chirped his agreement and settled down for what was obviously going to be a very long and very important conversation about the future of interspecies relations. Outside the conference room windows, the stars continued their eternal dance, but now they bore witness to something new, the first alliance between humanity, the Cytherian Empire, and the Shadow Maw packs. It had all started with one terrified species setting loose their top predator, and one human who giggled and offered it a treat.